Arizona Territory, 1881. Late summer. The kind of heat that baked grief into the ground and left it there. He found her at dusk, with a dry wash narrow between two walls of red stone, an Apache woman crumpled in the dust, blood dried black against her dress, buzzards already circling lower than a living person deserved. One bare arm lay flung out. Fingers clawed into the sand like she had tried to hold on to the world, and the world had let go first. The tracks around her told the rest. Cavalry horses, shod and hurried. A scatter of brass casings. One set of boot prints that lingered a moment too long over where she fell, then turned away. He dropped to one knee beside her, breath tight. No, he was already too late to run from whatever this was. The desert around him held still. No wind, no crickets, just a slow cooling of rock and the faint copper stink of blood ground into dust. If you've ridden this far with me, partner, you can feel it too, the heat, the dust, the bad trail this day just took. Go on and tip your hat. Hit that like button, leave a thought in the comments, and subscribe for more tales from the West. We'll keep riding into places like this. So you don't have to. Her chest moved. It was a shallow, ragged lift, hardly enough to shift the beads at her throat, but it was there. He saw the broken rhythm, counted against the thunder of his own heart, and understood the math. One woman caught between worlds, one man whose whole life had been made out of bad balances. Up close, the wound told its own story. A bullet through the side, high enough to miss the gut, low enough to tear through something important. The band of her dress was stiff with dried blood, where someone had tried to bind it and given up. Her skin burned under his fingertips, heat from fever more than sun. The leftover shells in the sand were army issue. The hoof prints wore a pattern he knew too well. Tight formation, disciplined pace. The mark of men riding under a flag who thought it made them cleaner than what they did. He had ridden in lines like that once. His name, in the world that still bothered with names, was Eli Caron. Men who remembered the war called him a scout. Men who met him after called him a drifter, a bounty finder, a man who knew how to read sign and sell it. Somewhere along the way, whatever he had started out as had worn down to one fact. Trouble followed his boots, and he did not always step aside for it. The left shoulder under his coat ached from an old musket ball. One knee throbbed in time with the woman's pulse, a souvenir from a bronc that had gone wrong. He knew what it meant to be broken but not finished. She lay in that same narrow space now. He could leave her. The thought came quiet, practical, like an officer's order once had. The patrol that did this might still be near. Her people might be nearer. Either side could put him in the ground before the night cooled. The safe move was to let the desert pull her the rest of the way under and ride on. He slid an arm carefully beneath her shoulders instead. The movement dragged the sound out of her, half breath, half torn off groan. Her eyes fluttered, dark and unfocused, searching for something that was not him. Her weight felt lighter than it should have, like she had been hungry a long time. He eased her up against his chest, feeling the hot seep of fresh blood to the old bandage, and carried her to the bay horse waiting in the wash. The mare snorted once, uneasy at the smell, then steadied as his hand found her neck. She had carried him through worse days than this. He told himself that counted for something, even if no one ever wrote it down. He lifted the woman as gently as his battered shoulder allowed, settling her sideways across the saddle, head against the horn, feet dangling. Her beads clicked together softly, the only delicate sound in a world that had forgotten what delicate meant. In the east, beyond the low line of the hills, a bruised band of cloud had started to pile up, dark against the last of the light. Late summer storms came fast in this country. First dust, then wind, then a wall of water that turned quiet washes into killing rivers. The tracks of patrol led away north, toward the fort. The faint, older sign of an Apache band bent west, into broken country where white men did not last long. He turned the bay west. The decision surprised him even as he took it. The fort meant light, bandages, whiskey, a surgeon with metal tools who might, if ordered, try to keep an Apache woman alive long enough to question her. It also meant questions he did not want to answer about why he was the one bringing her in, about what he had seen, about where his loyalties sat these days. West meant something else. A long, hard ride into country, where his name was a curse in 2 languages. A chance, slim and mean, that he could put her back into the hands of people who would not spit when they said her kin. The first wind hit before he cleared the cut in the hills. It came low and sudden, carrying grit and the distant hush of falling water. The bay laid her ears back and pushed into it, hooves thudding on packed sand. The woman on the saddle let out another thin sound, lost almost at once in the rising roar. He rode into the gray wall where day ended and storm began. Rain came in hard, slanting sheets, turned the world to streaks and shadows. The trail under his horse dissolved into mud, then stone, then was gone altogether, replaced by instinct and the faint shapes of ridges he had memorized years before when he followed a column of bluecoats into these same hills as they hunted smoke and song out of the draws. Memory walked with him now, men shouting, fire on the horizon, the sound of women wailing in a language the army reports never bothered to try to spell. He had told himself then that he was just a man who found the paths. He did not pull the triggers. Guilt did not care about the fine print. The wash below him woke up. Water, born out of miles of hard rock and narrow canyons, slammed into the channel in a brown wall. It hit boulders and split, took the path of least resistance, clawed at the banks. The place where he had knelt beside the woman, an hour before vanished under churning foam. He angled the bay higher, away from the main current, tore a line of dark shapes, juniper and scrub clinging to a low shelf of rock. The mare fought for footing, hooves slipping, muscles bunching. His bad knee screamed as he shifted his weight to keep them both upright. The woman on the saddle sagged, head bumping against his chest. Warmth spread across his shirt, where a wound had reopened. They made the shelf by inches. Water boiled below, snapped at the heel of his boot like it wanted more of him. The storm hammered the land flat, sound and water and light all crashing together. He found a shallow cave tucked into the rock, barely more than an overhang, but dry enough to count. He guided the bay under it, tied her short, then slid the woman down into his arms. She was lighter than before. He laid her on the packed earth, tore his own bandana into strips, and pressed him against the wound, ignoring the way his fingers slipped on blood. Her breath came ragged. Each inhale a climb, each exhale a fall. Her eyes open once, wide and black, and fixed on the thing hanging at her throat. A small leather pouch, dark with sweat and age. His hand went to it almost without asking his mind. He loosened the thong, slid the pouch free, and felt the shape inside. Not beads, not herbs. Metal, cold, even in this heat. He shook it into his palm. A Union officer's ring, silver worn dull by years of skin and work. The crest on its face scraped, but still clear enough. He knew it because it had been his once. He had pawned in a border town after the war, traded for whiskey and a week's worth of bad decisions. Later he heard it found its way north on the hand of a young lieutenant who thought shine could make up for inexperience. Later still, word came quiet that the lieutenant had gone missing after walking into an Apache camp under a white scrap of cloth, trying to talk peace with men who had every reason not to listen. The ring rested now against the chest of an Apache woman bleeding out in a storm he had ridden her into. The past folded in on itself in that cave, his hand around the ring, her breath counting down seconds, the roar of water outside like cannon in a narrow valley. He saw a boy version of himself on parade ground dust, believing orders made sense. Saw himself later drawing maps for men who never touched the land with anything but hooves and gunmetal. Saw the line of bodies at Cienega Creek when a village that had been told to move by sunrise was torn apart at midnight instead. He had been late to every decent choice in his life. She shuddered once. The breath left her in a slow, long sigh that did not come back. The storm outside did not pause to notice. Rain drummed. Water clawed its way down toward the flats. Somewhere lightning hit rock and split it open like an old story. He sat there a long minute, one hand on her cooling shoulder, the other wrapped tight around that ring until the edges cut his skin. Morning came on gray and heavy. The storm walked off to ruin some other stretch of country, and the wash below lay wide and scarred, littered with branches and the bloated bodies of rabbits that had chosen wrong burrows. He built a cairn just inside the mouth of the cave, stacking stones until his shoulders burned and his fingers bled. He laid the woman's beads on the top, then set the ring there too. It felt wrong to take it back, like stealing one more thing from a people he owed too much. When he stepped back, he knew the next part before he admitted it. Apache scouts would already be ghosting along the ridges, reading the storm story. They would find the wash, the tracks, the scoured-out army sign. Sooner or later, they would find this cave, the cairn, the beads, the ring. They would read him there too, the trail in, the trail out, the direction he took when he left. He could point his horse toward the fort, offer what he had seen in exchange for coin and a place at somebody's fire. The officers there would be glad enough to hear the patrol had done its job hard, that one more band of hostiles lay quiet in the dust. They would never hear the part about the ring or the way the wound had been bound once already by hands not wearing blue. Or he could ride deeper into the hills, not to hide, to place himself where the judgment belonged. The bay snorted when he let her out, sighed still ribbed from yesterday's effort. The air smelled scrubbed, a rare freshness over the usual baked minerals and old smoke. He swung into the saddle slow, every old injury putting in his complaint, and turned not toward the fort smoke on the distant plain, but toward the broken country where the land itself looked like it had survived a scalping. He rode without hurry. He did not try to cover his sign. Let them see him coming. By noon, he had reached a high saddle between ridges, a natural throat in the hills. There, on a flat of rock above a narrow trail, he dismounted, unbuckled his gun belt, and laid it down. The rifle followed, propped against a boulder. He unhooked the canteen and said beside them, the last gesture of a man who understood that what happened next might not involve thirst. Then he knelt, dust bit through his pants. The sun pressed on the back of his neck. The wind, coming up the draw, tasted of juniper and distant smoke. He let his hands rest open on his thighs, palms up, empty. He did not pray. Whatever words he had once known for that work felt worn out. He simply stayed there, a single figure on a strip of rock, ring grooves still printed in his palm. Time stretched. Shadows moved. The land watched in its own slow way. They came in so quietly that only the bay noticed at first. The mare's ears flicked toward the far rocks, then forward, then stilled. A faint scrape of leather on stone. The soft click of a horse's hoof. The sense of eyes on his back like the weight of another sun. He did not turn. He had seen men die enough to know how it would go if they chose that. A shout, a rush, the hot punch of an arrow or a bullet. He waited with a body that had once been quick and was now only practiced. None of that came. Instead, something small and light dropped on the rock in front of him, landing between his open hands with a soft, dry tap. He looked down. The ring lay there, clean of blood and dust, silver face turned up. Beside it, a strip of cloth, Apache woven, bright against the stone, cut short. A piece torn from some larger pattern he would never see. The gift sat there like a verdict that knew it wasn't finished. When he lifted his head, the ridge across from him was empty, no figures, no horses, no raised weapons. Just a memory of shapes that might have been there a moment before, already folded back into rock and shadow. Their justice, it seemed, was not to kill him. It was to send him back into the same hard world with one more weight to carry. The knowledge that the people he had wronged had looked him in the face, had seen what he did at the grave in the storm on this rock, and chosen to leave him alive with it. He slid the ring onto his finger. It did not fit quite right anymore. Too loose, like it belonged to that young officer and some version of himself that had died back at Cienega Creek. The cloth he folded and tucked into the lining of his coat, over his heart, where no one else would see it unless they cut him open. When he took up the reins again, he did not pick up the gun belt. The weapons could rust on that rock, or be taken by whoever found them next. The story of what they had done and failed to do stayed with him either way. He rode out of the hills under a sky scrubbed clean by storm, into a country that still did not care who lived or died on it. He would show up in other towns under other names, shoulders bent a little more, eyes a little older. Some folks would call him lucky. Some would call him cursed. Only the land and a cairn and a cave and a circle of riders who never spoke his language knew the whole of it. A cowboy on his knees beside a wounded Apache woman in a dying wash, realizing he was too late to run and just barely on time to change the ending by one fragile degree. In a West that wrote most of its justice in gunpowder and ink, sometimes the heaviest verdict was the one that let a man live, with no alibi, no absolution, and one small, stubborn chance to be less a ghost than he had been the day before.